Good morning. It's time now for the House Whisperer Show on WWDB Talk 860. And on today's program, we have a special treat. We're going to be on for a full hour. So there's lots of things to talk about.
Our house is a very, very, very fine house with two cats in the yard. Life used to be so hard. Now everything is easy 'cause of you. And now,
Good morning. It's time once again for another edition of the House Whisperer Show, where every house has a story. On WWDB Talk 860. Stay tuned for expert advice. We've got the real expert right here about maintaining your house from the roof to the basement and everything in between. Professional home inspector Jack Milne. Jack, good morning. Glad to have you back. How are you?
I am great, Barry. You know, it's been a hot summer, and
Yes, it has.
You know, and you know, the city of Philadelphia is kind of its own entity, and although we have a river on one side, it seems like it really takes some winds to move air in and around the city. So I thought I would do today's topic exactly on that, oil heat and the Philadelphia air quality. And it really is a toxic situation. But, of course, before I kick in, I want to thank my sponsors, because without them I wouldn't be able to chat with you today. So Borough Exterminating. I actually had an opportunity last week to hear Rob Bruno. And, you know, the man knows his stuff when it comes to wood-destroying insects. So I ask that you reach out to him at 610-586-5640. Bucksmont Inspections, although you may not see on-site sewage systems much in the city, you're going to see them everywhere out in the country. And these folks, again, are just top quality when it comes to on-site sewage evaluation, but also repairs. And they can be reached at 215-669-4213. Pest Blaster, Michael Canner has been a guest on this show quite a few times, and you know, he gets involved with radon, mold, wood-destroying insects, as well as pest removal. So his phone number is 215-295-5555. BrainFleshGear.com. Again, I have been hearing from these folks. I do thank you for reaching out to them. It seems like it's holiday time around here now, and people are getting their T-shirts and sweatshirts made up. And some of the things that are coming across that I've had feedback on have been real exciting. So I want to thank you for reaching out to those guys. And then, of course, Tri-County Inspection Company. It seems like we're going further and further away. We were in Oxford, Pennsylvania, which is right on the boundary of Maryland last week. So we do serve 15 counties, and from here to there and there to here. So phone numbers, I'll give you a few. Bucksmont area, 215-295-2030. Delaware County, 610-296-2004. The Lehigh Valley, 610-346-7880. And South Jersey, 856-853-4224. And as I always like to ask, if you're using one of my sponsors, please let them know that you heard their ad on the House Whisperer Show. So I have been away from the email box. I do want to visit it again today. Darrell from East Oak Lane sent me an email about his home inspector after he had heard the show on June 4th about risk versus reward. And it goes something like this. Jack, I brought one of those 3-story row homes in Mount Airy. My home inspector looked way up to the top of the roof, and although it was a flat roof, he started with his extension ladder and got on the porch roof. From there, he used this collapsible ladder that I've never seen before and climbed to the dormer roof. He brought that ladder up again and finally got to the top. I've never seen a man climb like this. This inspector was looking down on the ground at me, and he had to be at least 50 feet in the air. So his risk, my reward. It was worth every cent of the $500 that I paid him. Truly amazing. So thanks, Darrell. You know, I appreciate all the hard work that home inspectors do day in and day out, being one. We go to, great lengths to inform our clients of the condition of the home so you as a buyer can make a wise decision as to purchase or look again. So please email me, folks, at thehousewhisperershow@gmail.com. and I may post your letter. And, of course, don't forget the podcast at www.dbam.com. And, of course, you can always look back into the archives at thehousewhisperershow.com. So this show today, I think, really relates to all of us who live in and around the city. And again, the topic is oil heat and Philadelphia air quality. It's a toxic situation. So as summer sets in, nothing like the old song, "Hot Time, Summer in the City, Back of My Neck, It's Feeling So Gritty." And man, that song I think dates back to the 60s.
Yeah, I remember that song.
Especially when I'm walking attics, you know what I mean, Barry?
Yep.
So, as the summer really sets in, the air quality really stays still because, again, we don't have any prevailing winds. So smog, which is a combination of smoke and fog, haze and humidity, will settle over us, making us uncomfortable. And it's not only those of us who are in our middle ages, but primarily youngsters and oldsters, and it can make it very difficult to breathe. Asthma is really about the amount of moisture in our lungs, and it can affect our livelihoods, our health plans, as well as life expectancy. And I think one of the most brutal things out there right now that a lot of our house is heated by is coal. But that's a whole nother topic for another day. But City Council was looking to reduce sulfur in the byproducts of combustion that oil heaters, hot water heaters, and businesses spew into our air on a daily basis. And beginning in June, City Councilwoman Blondell Brown proposed tightening limits for heating oil that is sent and sold into the city. So proponents are concerned that Philadelphia will become what they call a dumping ground for higher sulfur, and in most municipalities now, a lower sulfur is required and mandated. So for some reason, City Council wanted to really kind of tighten up some of these loopholes. So in essence, again, we're not the only place where this high sulfur in oil is being delivered. So lower requirements are now mandated by the states of New Jersey, Delaware, and understand this, the rest of Pennsylvania. So what I don't understand, if Pennsylvania requires lower sulfur, why is Philadelphia excluded? And this is a loophole that has to and had to be closed. So Pennsylvania considers Philadelphia its own entity. And sometimes City Council feels it can circumvent the state law. Other times it wants to be protected by the state law. So, for example, our home inspection law in Pennsylvania does not require licensing, but the city of Philadelphia does. And so, sometimes they want to have it both ways. But high sulfur, when it burns, gives off sulfur dioxide. So the lower the content of oil in sulfur, the less dioxide makes it into the air and hangs around. So in most states in the Northeast, okay, now I'm not talking Philadelphia, but let's talk, Maine, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont. They burn about 80% of the heating oil in the nation. And I'm just shocked by that number. But these states already meet or are scheduled to meet the sulfur content level of 15 parts per million. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a couple minutes, but about 6% of the homes in the city use oil. Most are heated by natural gas. 6% represent about 36,000 homes and small businesses. So it's a small number, but a fairly large amount still of homes. So sulfur dioxide contributes to the formation of a very fine particulate matter that travels deep into the lungs and is absorbed by the bloodstream. Along with other pollutants in the city that we inhale on a daily basis, can lead to respiratory disease, heart disease, and potential heart attacks. So currently, Philadelphia does not meet the national air quality standards for these particulates. So other things I find astounding is that in the city, 22% of children have asthma. Pennsylvania currently has a statewide standard of 2,000 to 3,000 parts per million of sulfur, but is being lowered to 500 parts per million by 2016. So referring back to those Northeast states that they're looking by 2016 to be at 15 parts per million, Pennsylvania is trying to lower it by 500 parts per million. So it's still considerably higher than some of the other states around us. Now, Philadelphia currently has a standard of 2,000 parts per million. Okay? This standard was actually set in 1978. So, Barry, that's what, 30 years? 40,
It's quite a long time ago, yeah.
Yeah. So, so City's Council says, hey, I think it's time that we bring this back up. And that's exactly what Councilwoman Brown wants. And she's looking to bring this level down to 15 parts per million by July 2015, which is really next year at this time. And she wants to match the ultra-low sulfur standards that are going into effect in New York, New Jersey, and Delaware no later than July 2016. So this is good news for the other side of the story. And that's what I call Philadelphia Energy Solutions. So, Barry, before I get involved with these folks, why don't we take our commercial break?
We can certainly do that. It's a good time to do it, and we'll come back. And you've got a great topic, as always, today.
Boro Exterminating has been specializing in wood-destroying insect inspection and control for over 40 years, serving Philadelphia and the surrounding counties. All inspectors are state certified and ensure providing their clients with professional inspections and treatments. Boro not only performs conventional termite treatments, but also handles special services like historic buildings and homes with wells, creeks, or ponds. The client is assured that all treatments will be performed safely when you hire Boro to do the work. They also provide radon testing in their service area. Boro's full-time office staff is available to help you schedule an appointment. Just call 610-586-5640 or send an email request to boroinspects@verizon.net. That's 610-586-5640 or email at boroinspects@verizon.net.
Specially created t-shirts by BrainFlushGear.com offer the extreme sports enthusiast an opportunity to have a clothing line available that suits their sport. BrainFlushGear.com understands that when we get the moment where we can jump on our motorcycles, wave runners, surfboards, snowmobiles, or skateboards, it can be priceless. They offer custom artwork including silk screening, transfers, and embroidery. Speak to one of their consultants today and they'll help you create your own Brain Flush. Visit BrainFlushGear.com or email them at contact@BrainFlushGear.com.
For your septic inspection and testing needs, please consider Bucksmont Inspections. They've been serving the Bucks and Montgomery County areas for over 15 years. As members of the Pennsylvania Septic Management Association, the Pennsylvania Association of Sewage Enforcement Officers, and the Pennsylvania Association for Professional Soil Scientists, Bucksmont Inspections can inspect your existing septic system or test for your new septic system placement. Please call Rob Bowie at 215-669-4213 and say you heard their ad on the House Whisperer Show.
As the temperatures gradually rise, so do the odds of all those filthy and unwanted critters invading your home like rodents, roaches, termites, and flies. Oh my! This summer, if you want to feel safe and secure from a possible creeping, crawling disaster, do yourself a favor and call the exterminating experts at Pest Blaster for all your pest control needs, including tests for radon and mold. Please visit pestblaster.com and you'll be sold. 215-295-5555.
Tri-County Inspection Company has been providing professional home inspections, commercial inspections, and historic property evaluations for over 25 years. Tri-County Inspection Company covers 13 counties, serving both New Jersey and Pennsylvania. They've performed inspections for over 70,000 clients and are members of the American Society of Home Inspectors, as well as the Pennsylvania Home Inspectors Coalition. They are licensed in both Philadelphia and New Jersey. For all of your real estate transactions, transactions, call Tri-County Inspections at 215-295-2030. For their New Jersey clientele, call 856-853-4224. In PA, call 215-295-2030. In New Jersey, 856-853-4224.
Our house is a very, very, very fine house.
And we're back with Jack Milne, the House Whisperer at WWDB, and talking about a vitally important topic. And I'll be honest with you, Jack, I had no idea about any of this stuff that you're talking about. I'm learning, along with the rest of our listeners. You're back on the air. Pick up where you left off.
Well, thank you, Barry. Before the break, we were talking about lowering sulfur dioxide levels. City Council recently did pass this into law, where they were dropping their parts per million of particulate from 2,000 parts per million down to 15 parts per million, and they're hoping to do that by July 2015. This is going to meet the levels that are currently in effect in New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. So, as I mentioned before the break, this is the good news. But there's another side of the story, and that's a group called the Philadelphia Energy Solutions. So, currently at their refineries, the 15 part per million standard is set. However, and this is a big however, the standard is not met when equipment must be shut down for repairs. Now, we don't know how often this is, and that was a problem that the City Council ran into too. But when repairs are required, Philadelphia Energy Solutions looks to other markets and hopefully can locate the product without having to raise costs. But outside our market, the capacity that we need and the costs play a role. Plus, we have to buy a minimum of 1 million barrels of oil at a time, and then reprocess it to bring it back to 15 parts per million. So it's that old supply and demand. If they don't want to pay a whole lot of money, well, Philadelphia is going to become this dumping ground. And I still don't understand that when we have to buy oil from somewhere else, why their level content can't be at the same level that all these other states are requiring. So I think they're buying it kind of cheap on the market. And $1 million for, 1 million barrels, I still don't understand why we still measure oil by a barrel. And I think a barrel is the equivalent of 42 gallons. It could be 55 gallons, but I'm not quite sure on that. But it seems like such an old method of measuring oil content. So again, as they look into costs and profits, a standard business practice, if we fail, let's bring in the cheapest oil with the highest sulfur content so we can remanufacture maybe and put it into the 36,000 homes or businesses that need it. And typically with oil, what I find is those that are oil-fired homes tend to be of lower income. They're only going to pay for really what they need, and especially with the heating situation that we had last year, where the cost of propane went up by a third, the cost of heating oil skyrocketed. These folks don't know what's in their oil, and so if they're spewing, I'll call it polluted oil for lack of a better term, again, it's going to affect their health. So by mid-June, City Council did approve Councilwoman Brown's bill and lowered the sulfur dioxide to 15 parts per million. And again, just as a reminder, Pennsylvania's limits are 500 parts per million currently. So lower sulfur content will increase fuel economy, and really by as much as 14 cents a gallon. So once you get what I'll call the new oil over the older oil, one is going to run you more efficient, two, it's going to make your equipment run more efficient, and three, you put less pollutants in the air. So if you do the math, with a 275-gallon oil tank at roughly $4 a gallon right now, that costs $1,100 to fill that oil tank. And in the city, it averages between 3 and 4 tanks over the winter. So this 14 cents a gallon can really make a dent in our oil bill. So with the new oil, with the sulfur, with the lower sulfur count, if they can save $200, $300 over the course of the winter, I mean that's what I call discretionary income. But my question is the House Whisperer is this: if only 6,000%, or 6,000, if only 6% of homes and businesses in the city of Philadelphia require oil to heat their homes, which again represents about 36,000 properties in total, I want to know, where's the gas? And my opinion is it's got to be close by. So gas laterals crisscross the city and the streets to all corners, both big and small, throughout the city. And what I'd like to see, I understand that the gas company is looking to be sold by city council to offset some of the costs of the city and to help the school budgets, et cetera, et cetera. But if I were the gas company, what could I do or would I do to reach out to these 36,000 properties to try to get rid of oil completely? What kind of incentives can be offered by the gas company to let these people get rid of their old, inefficient boilers, furnaces, etc., that may be burning on average 75%, and get them involved with gas, where they average starting at 85% and can move up to 96%. What incentives over their monthly bills if they ran $50 to $60 more a month to drive this incentive to these homeowners to get rid of the oil and get more efficient equipment, and at the same time clean our air. So I know my sister lived in California, and back out there, folks, believe it or not, heat is not a requirement. And that cracks me up, just being here in the Northeast. But my sister was able to get a low interest loan to put a gas furnace into her house, and she paid it off over a couple of years. But you know what? That's what the city needs. That's what the Philadelphia Gas Works needs. They need an incentive plan to reach out to these folks and say, hey, we're offering this. Why don't you give us some thought? We'll run the gas to your house, and not only can you use the gas for heating and hot water, but you can also use it to lower your other utility bills by using it for cooking or drying your clothes, or even as much as an outside grill. That's what I always talk to my clients about, is that outside grill. So that's my thought on this. And then this way we don't have to worry about, Councilwoman Blondell, great idea, and I'm glad it did pass. It's time. Again, that bill is over almost 40 years old. But there's got to be other alternatives where we can reach out to these homes and get rid of the oil. And the options beyond oil are incredible. And, for folks, if they choose to go high efficient equipment, you can forget about the old chimneys, many of which need liners to a cost of $1,100 to start, up to $2,300 depending on the height of the home. And we can vent these high efficient gas units either through the back of the home or through the sidewalls, and if necessary, back up the old chimneys. I mean, I absolutely commend City Council for their actions. We all have to breathe clean air no matter where we live. Oil, however, is like a noose around the necks of all Americans, and we're being strangled by the Mideast or even by our own oil companies that still sell oil again by the barrel. And again, I don't get it. I think we should stop the pollution of our air and breathe free. 15 parts per million is a great start, but honestly, folks, I feel like we need to turn off the tap. And I think it's really the best thing for all of us. So I do ask all my listeners out there, particularly in the city or even at the burbs, check with your Philadelphia gas company. Check out with PECO. Check with, who's our other one, up there around Quakertown. I'm thinking PPM, but I'm stuck on parts per million. But anyway, if you reach out to your local utility, see if gas is available. And if you can't get gas, look into propane. Because, again, it's a much cleaner, efficient type of heat source, Again, you can do multiple things with it, and again, let's get off this oil diet. I think again, it's the best thing for all of us.
Yeah, a few years ago we switched. We got rid of our old inefficient heater and got a brand new one, and I see a huge difference in our gas bill. So the efficiency alone can save you literally hundreds, maybe even more than that. I think we're saving over $1,000 a year.
Well, Barry, in my own home, I mean, my house was built in 1968. It was oil-fed. I guess about 5 years ago, the house was about 38 years old. I did replace my oil-fired boiler. That was about 73 to 75% efficient with a 96% high-efficient direct vent boiler. I paid for that boiler in 4 years.
And you're right. The heat, there's no chimney. It just goes out the side of the house. They explained to us that a lot of the hot air that our old inefficient heater was producing was going up the chimney instead of heating my house. Now the hot air doesn't come out of the house.
Yeah, it's a little bit warmer than a dryer vent.
That's it.
And I know that when I got mine initially up and running, my neighbor thought my house was on fire because he saw all this steam coming from the back
right.
of the house. I assured Uncle Ed that everything was fine. And again, folks, if you're dealing with an older piece of heating equipment, today's offerings are so intelligent and so much more fuel efficient that sometimes it's better to let the old stuff just go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And start saving money.
Speaking about going, I think it's time for us to go.
Well, Barry, these times go pretty quick. But
I know.
I do want to just bring up real quick, next week we're going to talk on fences.
Oh, I love that topic for next week.
Yeah, I know, Barry. You gave it to me. So this is going to be Barry's show next week.
Oh, I gave it to. Oh, I didn't know that.
And it's going to also talk about privacy. So fences and privacy, same effect, different directions. So, as I like to say, have a good week. Please spend time with friends and family. And I look forward to seeing you next week on the House Whisperer Show.
Always good having Jack Milne on WWDB, the highlight of our Sunday morning. Tune in again next week for another edition of the House Whisperer Show with professional home inspector Jack Milne. And you can listen to previous programs, or if you have any questions, visit thehousewhisperershow.com. This is Barry Reisman. Thank you very much for listening to WWDB. You're listening to the House Whisperer Show on WWDB Talk 860. Ordinarily, we leave you at this time, but on today's program, we have an extra special bonus, another half hour. So stay tuned because there's more House Whisperer coming up with Jack Milne right here at WWDB.
Our house is a very, very, very fine house with 2 cats in the yard. Life used to be so hard. Now everything is easy 'cause of you. And now...
Hello and welcome to another edition of the House Whisperer Show, where every house has a story, on WWDB Talk 860 and WWDBAM.com. Stay tuned for expert advice about maintaining your house from the roof to the basement, featuring professional home inspector Jack Milne. And once again, Jack has another terrific guest, and we'll let him introduce him. First, let's say good morning to Jack. How you doing today?
Hey, great, Barry. As I mentioned last week, July 4th is already over.
Yeah.
And I know I got my tan going, but it just seems that this summer's flying by. I mean, the real estate market's been very busy. And being a home inspector, I do have the opportunity of reaching out to other vendors. For example, Rob Bruno is with me today from Borough Exterminating. But I also can talk to mortgage companies and realtors and really get a feel for the market. So if you're looking to buy real estate, I know a lot of people want to try to get in by the end of the summer so they can get their kids started. But I've been doing a lot of first-time home buyers too. So it's really exciting to get these folks started with their next phase of life. But Before we kick in, I always want to thank my sponsors because without them I wouldn't be on the air. So I'm going to start with Bucksmont Inspections, Rob Bowie. If you have any issues regarding on-site sewage evaluations, or even as simple that if you have a macerator in your basement, which is a human waste grinder, whenever I see them, I tell my clients to get a pump alarm. Because if by chance that pump fails, you only got about 42 gallons of waste before it's going to spill back into your bathroom. So you may want to reach out to Bucksmont Inspections at 215-669-4213 and have one of these pump alarms installed. They're not all that much, and I think it's worth every cent, honestly. Pest Blaster. Tri-County works again with this company that does radon testing, mold testing, wood-destroying insect evaluations, as well as pest removal. And their phone number is 215-295-5555. BrainFleshGear.com. It's that simple. But if you do want to email them, you can go to contact@BrainFleshGear.com. Again, this is an apparel company that can make anything that you dream of, and they can make a few or they can make hundreds if you have that event that you want something a little bit special. And then, of course, Tri-County Inspection Company. We serve about 15 counties from the Lehigh Valley all the way down, almost to Maryland, and then to Salem County in New Jersey, and as far north as above Hunterdon County in New Jersey. So if you're looking in what we do call the tri-state area, why don't you reach out to us at 215-295-2030. I can probably give you about 6 other phone numbers, but why don't you go to the website at tcinspect.com. And since I have Rob Bruno, who's been one of my advertisers since I've been on the air for about 3 years on the air, Rob, why don't you tell us about Burrow Exterminating?
Hey, Jack. Well, Burrow Exterminating was founded about 51 years ago in 1963 in Collingdale, Pennsylvania, by my father, Len Bruno. We provide wood-destroying insect inspection and control to home inspection companies, real estate agents, buyers and sellers throughout Philadelphia and the 5 surrounding counties.
So let me ask you this. How old were you when you started getting involved with the business?
Very young, since it was a family business. I mean, there were times when I was about 11 years old, 12 years old, and helping out, on termite treatments. That was quite some time ago, back in the early 70s.
Holy moly. Yeah, it's always nice with a family business because you really get to know the business from the inside out. And, and especially being in the service business like we both are, I think you have to have the right approach. In regards, and especially in our business with buyers, sellers, realtors, I think it gives you a soft edge to business, and that's one thing I really enjoy about working with you. You've got great skills, and having that much of a background behind you. I think it's just I know every time the Burrow shows up at one of the properties that we inspect, I know you work with a bunch of other home inspectors, that we know the job's going to be done the first time and the right time. So let me ask you this, Rob. What are some of the changes that we've seen regarding termiticides?
Well, years ago, there were probably 2 that were used most often, and I'm sure you've heard of these. Chlordane was one, and Aldrin was the other. Very persistent termiticides, which we're no longer able to use, have since been banned since the mid-'80s. And that they were great termiticides. They worked well, and one of the reasons they worked so well is because they were so persistent. Once you put them somewhere, they tended to stay there for a very long time and continue to do their job. But that also was a double-edged sword, because once they got somewhere where you didn't want them, they were very hard to get rid of. Of course, suspected carcinogens also, and that was enough for EPA, to ban their use, I think back in April of 1988. Most companies saw the writing on the wall, manufacturers especially, like Dow Chemical Company and FMC, and they started manufacturing alternative termiticides before the EPA ban because they knew it was imminent. So as Chlordane and Aldrin and the others went by the wayside, we did not have to wait. There were already alternative termiticides available for us.
So let me ask you this, Rob, for a house that had a chlordane treatment, say in the early 80s, I think they were advertising, this chemical will stand up to everything for 30 years. At this point, for those homes that have not been treated for an extended period of time, it would probably be prudent to have someone come in and take another look around.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's one of the myths. You hear people say that, well, this property was treated with chlordane, you're never going to have termites here. And, well, maybe where the chlordane is still intact and hasn't been disturbed, that won't be an area that the termites will penetrate. But where the layers of mulch over the years have been stacked on top of that treated soil, there's no protection. So a property that was treated with chlordane years ago is susceptible. And very often, just through adding additions and changes that are made to the exterior grading, that barrier is compromised. So although the chlordane is still persistent, it's not a uniform barrier anymore. And we see a lot of reinfestations due to that.
Well, how long do the new termiticides last now?
Well, the first alternatives, synthetic pyrethroids was one, chlorpyrifos was another one, which has since been banned, ironically. Yeah, that one had a really long residual life. But the other ones, the synthetic pyrethroids, which were manufactured to mimic the active ingredient derived from chrysanthemums, that had a short residual life, maybe 5 to 7 years. And the ones that we're using now, the more recent ones, which would be Termidor and Premise, I think they're about 15 to 18 years in the field trials. It's still running, still providing control in many of the test sites. So the length of the residual is still pretty good. I don't know if it'll be as strong as chlordane as far as residual life, but for all practical purposes, it has a good residual life.
Let me ask you this, Rob. How has applications of this termiticide changed over the years?
Applications have changed drastically, really. When we were using chlordane, aldrin, pentachlorophenol, the chemicals that have since been banned, you could treat on the exterior, drilling through concrete or pushing a rod down into the soil, about every 2 feet or so. And some companies would even put the application holes every 3 feet. You would still get control. When they came out with the alternative termiticides, for many other reasons, they had to tighten up the spacing. One of the main reasons was just increased callbacks. People were used to using chlordane, and chlordane was it was a slam dunk. It was easy to get control with it. So they tightened up the spacing. Now you had to do your applications closer and closer to each other. So instead of applying the chemical every 2 feet, you had to apply it every 18 inches, every 16 inches, and they just kept changing the labels as they went, the manufacturers. And then it wound up to 1 foot spacing. And that seems to be with, it's a big difference. If you think about it, drilling through concrete, that's pretty labor intensive. So every time they made those label changes, there was a lot of griping in the industry. But what are we going to be drilling every 3 inches by the time they're done? Because it's a lot of work, and you've got to drill through that concrete. You've got to seal up that concrete after you're through with it. But that was one of the major things. And that really is not a big deal now because it seems like all the termiticides have that 1 foot spacing. And wood treatments is another thing that changed. We used to do wood treatments routinely. You'd see the joists and framing in a basement have little drill marks in every single one. That's rarely done anymore. There's really no need for it. And that was a labor-intensive application as well. So the joist ends not being treated anymore, that's a big one. Closer spacing with the application sites. And places, just in general, that you would drill years ago that you would never drill anymore. I'm sure you've been in basements where there's the 8x8s and 9x9 tiles.
Oh, yes, the vinyl asbestos tiles.
Right, exactly. Years ago, if you had a tile floor and you had to drill through it, you didn't care what kind of tiles were there. No one even really knew about the hazards of asbestos. You would just drill right through that floor, and you'll see termite treatment holes in many old vinyl asbestos floors.
I want to know how they could actually make a plug out of that vinyl asbestos tile, and put it right back into the space, where it had been initially. I always was curious on that one.
It was an arch punch, is what they called it. Basically, it was a circular I don't know how to describe it. It's a circular blade, basically, and it was like a punch with a hole in the middle of it. And you took a hammer, and you took that punch, and you hit it really hard, and drove it right through that vinyl tile. And then when you pulled the punch up, that little circle of vinyl asbestos would be in there.
I'll tell you what, gentlemen, I'm going to hit the button here for just a few minutes because we have a commercial break coming up. So can you both stand by?
Sure.
You're listening to the House Whisperer Show, and our special guest is Rob Bruno of Borough Exterminating. Jack Milne is here, and we're all here, and we'll take this break and be right back and talk more about those critters that you don't want in your house right after this.
Borough Exterminating has been specializing in wood-destroying insect inspection and control for over 40 years, serving Philadelphia and the surrounding counties. All inspectors are state certified and ensure providing their clients with professional inspections and treatments. Borough not only performs conventional termite treatments, but also handles special services like historic buildings and homes with wells, creeks, or ponds. The client is assured that all treatments will be performed safely when you hire Borough to do the work. They also provide radon testing in their service area. Borough's full-time office staff is available to help you schedule an appointment. Just call 610-586-5640 or send an email request to boroughinspects@verizon.net. That's 610-586-5640 or email at boroughinspects@verizon.net.
Specially created t-shirts by BrainFlushGear.com offer the extreme sports enthusiast an opportunity to have a clothing line available that suits their sport. BrainFlushGear.com understands that when we get the moment where we can jump on our motorcycles, wave runners, surfboards, snowmobiles, or skateboards, it can be priceless. They offer custom artwork including silk screening, transfers, and embroidery. Speak to one of their consultants today, and they'll help you create your own Brain Flush. Visit BrainFlushGear.com or email them at contact@BrainFlushGear.com.
For your septic inspection and testing needs, please consider Bucksmont Inspections. They've been serving the Bucks and Montgomery County areas for over 15 years. As members of the Pennsylvania Septic Management Association, the Pennsylvania Association of Sewage Enforcement Officers, and the Pennsylvania Association for Professional Soil Scientists, Bucksmont Inspections can inspect your existing septic system or test for your new septic system placement. Please call Rob Bowie at 215-669-4213 and say you heard their ad on the House Whisperer Show.
As the temperatures gradually rise, so do the odds of all those filthy and unwanted critters invading your home like rodents, roaches, termites, and flies. Oh my! This summer, if you want to feel safe and secure from a possible creeping, crawling disaster, do yourself a favor and call the exterminating experts at Pest Blaster for all your pest control needs, including tests for radon and mold. Please visit pestblaster.com and you'll be sold. 215-295-5555.
Tri-County Inspection Company has been providing professional home inspections, commercial inspections, and historic property evaluations for over 25 years. Tri-County Inspection Company covers 13 counties, serving both New Jersey and Pennsylvania. They've performed inspections for over 70,000 clients and are members of the American Society of Home Inspectors, as well as the Pennsylvania Home Inspectors Coalition. They are licensed in both Philadelphia and New Jersey. For all of your real estate transactions, call Tri-County Inspections at 215-295-2030. For their New Jersey clientele, call 856-853-4224. In PA, call 215-295-2030. In New Jersey, 856-853-4224.
Our house is a very, very, very fine house.
And we're back with the House Whisperer Show at WWDB Talk 860 and WWDBAM.com. And by the way, we are on your internet at WWDBAM.com. We are also on your iHeartRadio and on your TuneIn Radio app and all the various radio apps. And you can listen to us on your smartphone. And we're back with Jack Milne and Jack's special guest, Rob Bruno of Borough Exterminating. So let's go back to Jack.
Well, before we kick it right back into full gear here, Barry, let's ask Rob how folks can reach out to them.
Jack, they can reach us by phone at 610-586-5640 or through email at burrowinspects@verizon.net. They can also fax orders or requests if anyone's out there faxing still, and that would be 610-532-8378.
Well, today's topic, folks, is with, of course, Rob Bruno, talking about wood-destroying insects, chemicals, and applications. And here's a good one. I mean, how do you deal with potential contamination of like well water or stream?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You have to be very careful with termiticides being pumped into the soil when the water that you drink is coming out of that same soil. And for most people with public water, obviously that's not as much of a concern. But if you have a well in your house, and especially if the well is nearby or in the house, you'd be reluctant to just pump termiticide in the ground with threat of contaminating the well water. So there's plenty of other treatments that you can perform. There's wood treatments where you actually treat the joist ends with chemical like a borate or some other type of active ingredient labeled for termites. There's foam applications where you can drill into a wall void and take an aerosol can with a hose on it and shoot a foam formulation that expands into that wall cavity that would prevent termite infestation there. And of course, there's the bait systems where you can put termite bait right into the ground, and you've probably seen them. These little.
Yeah, I always think of the term Spectracon. Is that a brand name?
Spectracon is Dow Chemicals bait system.
Okay.
But there's a bunch of them. Yeah, there's Centricon, there's Advanced, there's Terminate. The green ones you see normally would be Centricon, the bright green.
Yes. Yep. And folks, these look like I'm just using my fingers. Probably about 6-inch round discs. And can you explain them, Rob? What the theory is behind those?
Some of them work in such a way that you can put the active ingredient that kills the termites directly in the ground, and the termites, just through random foraging, will find that active ingredient, and they'll consume it, bring it back to the rest of the colony, feed it to the rest of the colony, and the idea is that it will eliminate the colony completely. Others are just monitoring sites, and you keep pulling up those stakes or those stations to see if you get a hit, a termite eating a pine board or some type of cardboard material. Then at that point you would put the treated material in, and they would eat that and take it back. But it basically works as, like I said, random foraging, termites finding that bait in the ground. The only problem is occasionally the termites will not find the bait in the ground. They'll find your house first and continue to eat the house without ever finding the bait. And that does happen. So that's why ideally if you're going to have a bait system, good companies would propose some other treatment to get your primary control. And those wood treatments would be excellent. If you could put some termiticides above ground, not in the soil, but above ground at the point where the termites would contact your floor framing, I think that's a great way to do it. Just instead of waiting for the termites to find the bait, you're putting it where you know they're going to wind up or where they would cause some damage.
And that's why, when both of us are on site together, I think we both focus on grading, mulch levels, firewood that might be sitting against your home, or even in the garage. We're not there to invite the termites in. So we do have to be careful with how we put dead wood, literally, against our homes.
Yes, it's true. It's an invitation. Just like those bait stations are an invitation, you're trying to attract termites to those stations. Well, when you take firewood and you lay it on the ground right up against your house, you're basically doing the same thing. But like your point, even in the garage, when you lay it up against the garage wall, you've got that little crack. We've all seen it where the floor meets the wall. We call it the floor-wall juncture. And the termites will come right up through that crack and get into the firewood and maybe even to the wall framing above it, which then you have a problem.
Yeah, I even tell my clients, a lot of times we have these masonry fireplaces that are extended, and they have this area to the left or right where you can store your firewood. I said, man, put a nice silk plant arrangement in there and keep the firewood outside.
I think you're right. It's true. Yeah, because a lot of them are sitting close to grade or directly on grade, out beyond the foundation of the house.
Absolutely. Tell me, have regulations changed much?
Yeah, regs have changed. We never had licensing until I think it was the late 70s, maybe the early 80s. So there were really no regulations at all for commercial applicators. And now they do have them. Of course, the EPA regulations were always there. FIFRA, which regulated the use of pesticides, so the way we can apply them. And of course, the rule where the label is the law, that's been in force pretty much forever. But the labels change is what happens, and that's how the laws change, because if the label is the law, when the label changes, the law changed. We've seen a lot of label revisions over the years. That's one of the major changes. We brought up drilling through tile floors and interior slabs. If you remember years ago when you had a termite problem, they would treat the entire exterior perimeter. And then if you had a basement or interior slab addition, they were in there drilling the interior of that, hitting pipes, doing whatever was in their way. Termiticide finding its way into heating ducts, whatever was in the slab. Seriously, it was a risk. And it happened so often because the label said to do a complete treatment or a spec treatment, and if you had to treat those interior areas. That's all changed. Most of the termiticides now permit exterior treatment only, and then limited treatment in the areas of activity at the interior of the house. You can imagine how much that's cut down on chemical usage. It's cut down on the labor involved. And it's the science of the termiticides, really, that have allowed us to do that, because now the termiticides are non-repellent and they're slow-acting. If you can imagine a repellent termiticide, if you pumped it around the outside of a house and there were termites on the interior of the house, they would avoid that treated area. So you'd have to treat the inside also to get complete control. Now with today's termiticides, they're non-repellent. The termites don't even know that they're there. They travel freely back and forth. By the time they realize they've got a toxic dose, it's too late. So you can treat the exterior perimeter without putting any insecticide inside, and you'll get complete control. A lot of studies have borne that out, and just out in the field, it does work well.
For the novice out there, how can a homeowner tell if they do have termites?
Well, the swarm is the easiest one, because you rarely see a swarm of 5 or 10 termites. Usually it's pretty intense. You might see 100, you might see thousands of them. Wings breaking off of the bodies, that's another indication. We would determine between flying ants and termites. But that's the big thing, a termite swarm. Great numbers of them. Something you'd say, this is very unusual. And then termite shelter tubing as well. You might see a little mud tube built somewhere overnight or within a few days on the interior of a home. And you notice that wasn't there before, and it was built rather quickly. We get calls from homeowners a lot about that. They call us when we come out and certainly confirm their worst fears that it's termite. And damage. When someone's doing construction, they'll find damage sometimes.
One thing I bring up a lot is, if the property had been treated in the past, the importance and the relevance of a 1-year warranty. I think as time goes on, people tend to forget, the property's been treated. Why do I have to maintain a warranty of $100 a year? Go into that for me, Rob, because for $100 a year, I think it's a tremendous opportunity to have a professional come back and revisit the site, and just to make sure that there's no significant changes. But and I might be answering the question for you, but if you're putting your property up for sale and you dropped your homeowner's warranty, then you may be treating the property for your next buyer.
You may, if they find activity there, or for some reason that they recommend that it be treated. Where if there were a current warranty, that's right. The buyers would be much less apprehensive to proceed because it is under current warranty and it's been inspected every year. And it's just good to prevent further damage. When you have a warranty on, say, an appliance, for instance, you get a chance to renew it. But rarely does someone come out and check that appliance every year as part of the renewal fee, to forestall any damage that might occur.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I sure learned a lot about termites today and how to keep them out of the house. thank you so much for all that information. And Jack, I'm going to let you close it out for us.
Well, again, I want to thank Rob for joining me today. I always have the distinct pleasure of catching up to him out in the field, and with this time of year, I think it's we might be past the swarm season, but remember, termites never go to sleep. So, if you have any questions, again, reach out to Rob, a true professional, and again, he's at 610-586-5640. Next week, I've got an interesting topic. It's about oil heat and Philadelphia air quality. So I look forward to talking to you next week. And as I always like to close, as it is weekend, please spend time with family and friends. And I'll see you next week on the House Whisperer Show.
All right, and thanks so much to Rob Bruno Exterminating, and of course Jack Milne. And tune in again next week for another edition of the House Whisperer Show with professional home inspector Jack Milne. And you can listen to previous programs, or if you have any questions, visit thehousewhisperershow.com. I'm Barry Reisman. Thanks for listening to WWDB Talk 860.